Hi everyone, welcome to our journey through Mark's Gospel. We've got to chapter 4. I hope that as we're reading the Gospel, it's becoming obvious to us that Jesus really knows what he is doing. And here we're going to see that we can be confident of what he is doing. This chapter begins with one of Jesus' most famous parables, the parable of the sower. Farmer sows the seed, and in 3 cases out of 4 there is a poor response or no harvest. But in the final case, where the seed falls on good soil, there is a great growth, a great harvest. Jesus later explains the parable to his disciples and explains that one of the reasons he teaches in parables is not, as we sometimes think, to make things clearer, but actually to expose the hard-heartedness of those who are opposed to him. He then explains the various soils and the various responses that they will see to the Word of God. We possibly recognize them, maybe even see them in ourselves. But the punchline, as it were, is the amazing results the Word produces where it is received. 30, 60 or 100 times what is sown. Now that's not a normal harvest, it's a supernatural one. And that theme of fruitfulness of the Word of God is further highlighted through the chapter. Like the seed the farmer sows, it grows away secretly and eventually produces a harvest. And just like a tiny mustard seed grows into a great tree, so from simple beginnings, marvelous results can come when God is at work. And so we get the impression that Jesus is absolutely confident of what he is doing. He is sowing seed that will have a great result. And do you know what? The very fact that we are here studying his words 2,000 years later and that millions profess their faith in him is testimony to the truth of what he says here. The chapter finishes with another famous story, that of Jesus calming the storm. Jesus says they will go off to the other side of the lake, and off they set in the boat. Interestingly, as we read the story, we discover little details that have no direct relevance to the thrust of the story, such as the fact that there are other boats with them and that Jesus is asleep on a cushion. The scholars tell us that these are indications of eyewitness testimony. You remember that we think that Mark relies on the eyewitness accounts of Peter as he writes this gospel. Well, the storm blows up and it is so severe that these, some of them experienced fishermen are terrified. But Jesus is asleep, and when they waken him, amazingly, he rebukes the wind and the waves. Quiet, be still, he says. And it is completely calm. It implies that it happens immediately, and of course, normally, even if the wind stops, the swell of the waves continues for some time. So this is a remarkable miracle. And the question is put to the disciples in verse 40, where is your faith? In the Old Testament, it is clear that the control of the elements is one of those things that only God does. So Jesus is asking these men if they do not yet see who he is. They should. And if they realize who they had with them in the boat, then there would be no need for them to be afraid. But they are afraid, of course, not now of the storm, but because of what they have experienced. And they ask the question that hangs in the calm air at the end of the chapter. Who is this? And Mark lets it hang because he's saying to us, well, how would you answer that question? We're about a quarter of the way through this gospel, and Mark's burden in these opening chapters is to establish Jesus' identity. Who is this? He's introduced him as the Son of God. Does the evidence stack up? He teaches with authority. He drives out demons. He heals the sick. He calms storms with a word. He forgives sins. It's certainly what we might expect if the Son of God came into our world, isn't it? But he's more to tell us. So read chapter 5, and I'll see you tomorrow.